Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome you to the grounds of Charles University in this unique space in Vlastenecký sál. The 451 Degrees of Disinformation Conference, the international conference of the Central European Digital Media Observatory, CEDMO, begins. My name is Jana Magdoňová, and I will accompany you in the first part of this conference. First, I would like to explain its name. 451 Degrees of Disinformation refers to Ray Bradbury's famous book, Fahrenheit 451. I'm borrowing words from the CEDMO website. The title refers to the temperature at which paper burns, symbolizing the destruction of truth and the power that controls knowledge. In today's world, disinformation acts as the modern equivalent of these destructive fires. The spread of falsehoods across digital platforms threatens to consume the integrity of information in our societies. The conference will focus on three vital strategies to combat this danger: fact-checking, media literacy, and AI regulation. Each represents a crucial effort to counteract the harmful effects of disinformation. So, there will be a lot of tasks and space for discussion today. In this opening hour, 7 speakers will present their talks. I can assure you that you will have an hour full of current trends in the field of disinformation, international comparisons, and the results of unique researches on which national hubs collaborated. This will be followed by everyone's favorite coffee break, that is space not only for refreshments, but also for short networking. During the morning, we will also catch the first of 3 panels, which will be devoted to generative AI in the era of digital transformation. Discussion will be centered on the impact of generative AI on society, particularly concerning the proliferation of disinformation and its implication for public discourse. After lunch, you can look forward to the second panel, which will be about the implementation of the Digital Service Act. The discussion will examine the challenges of implementing the DSA across different jurisdictions, the expected impact on digital services, and the mechanism for enforcement and compliance. The conference will end with a panel where you can look forward to experts directly from practice, who will discuss media literacy and fact-checking and tell you about their practical experience. The panel seeks to inspire effective actions to strengthen social resilience against myth or disinformation. As you can see, today is going to be a very busy day. Therefore, please allow me to welcome the first of the keynote speakers, Václav Moravec, to the stage. Václav is the main coordinator and chairs the strategic board of the CEDMO consortium. He is a researcher at the Institute of Communication Studies and Journalism in the Faculty of Social Science at Charles University and at the Department of Production at FAMO in Prague.
Jana, many thanks. Madam Vice President, Madam Rector, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, welcome to the historic premises of Charles University. It's Charles University, one of the oldest universities in Europe, which is the coordinator of the multidisciplinary hub, Central European Digital Media Observatory, which operates thanks to partner organization in Poland, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. If you open our latest annual report, you will see that this May, a new era of CEDMO began to be written. I don't want to bore you list of activities and outputs that have remained behind CEDMO 1.0, but it's already evident that CEDMO 2.0 is stronger and more active. At this point, I would like to thank the 12 partners of Charles University who make up CEDMO 2.0. The fact that our work has resonance in the public sphere is evidenced not only by the number of visitors to our website, but also by the great interest of the new media in our outputs, such the CEDMO special brief or CEDMO fact-checking briefs. Speaking of thanks, I would like to take this opportunity to thank CEDMO Advisory Board Chairman Jochen Spangenberg. Jochen, many thanks for continuing with us. One of the new faces of the CEDMO Advisory Board is Silvio Waisboard, a leading sociologist of journalism, whose presentation you will see in a few moments. It's an honor to welcome Paolo Cesarini. Paolo is Program Director of the European Digital Media Observatory EDMO, back to Charles University after 1 year. Dear Paolo, thank you for support that EDMO provides to CEDMO. Our annual conference is held in the Patriotic Hall. As Jana said, we call it Vlastenecký sál in Czech. This is where the university library was originally located. It's symbolic that the title of this year's conference refers to one of the now classic books, the American author Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. I hope you will find this year's conference inspiring, just as CEDMO strives to be inspiring. I am delighted that the Vice President of the European Commission, Věra Jourová, has accepted the invitation to our annual conference. Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and dear friends, today the CEDMO ecosystem consists not only of 13 partners, but also of more than 20 collaborating organizations in Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland, including our donors as Google. Thank you all for being here today in the Patriotic Hall, Vlastenecký sál, and thanks for you being part of the CEDMO ecosystem. Many thanks.
Thank you for your words, Václav. The next speaker will be Věra Jourová, the Vice President of the European Commission for Values and Transparency. Mrs. Jourová deals with democracy, rule of law, media pluralism, and fight against disinformation. Microphone is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Indeed, Václav, to be in the Patriotic Hall of the Charles University, it is a noble feeling, but also a little bit of a burden to speak here. But I, first of all, want to express my pleasure and thanks for inviting me to this conference of Central European Digital Media Observatory, CEDMO. As we know, we are in a big election year. And I know this room is eager to hear the results of the elections held across the Atlantic Ocean. Also in Brussels, we are impatiently waiting. It's true that the American elections are going to have influence on European Union, but I wanted to bring your attention for a while to the elections in Moldova. Because if somebody wants to understand what are all the forms of foreign interference into the elections in a state, he or she should study the Moldovan elections and the campaign before the presidential elections, which fortunately Maya Sandu won. But there was everything from usage of AI, disinformation, huge campaigning, cyber attacks, but also the most primitive ways of influencing the single voters by bringing the money to them. And money from Russia, I think you understand from where. So I wanted to attract your attention to that because it's a good study material with a good result. But it's a really unprecedented moment of the combination of all the methods of foreign interference. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here to share with you the results of the assessment of the electoral campaign before the European elections. So looking back to June this year, with the intention to also look forward to take lessons from what happened in June this year. First of all, we were expecting all the forms of interference, foreign interference, but also domestic production. And we did everything to be well prepared. As you know, in the EU, we have legislation, which is some of it is in force, some is waiting, the Digital Services Act and a Code of Practice, which you know well, which has become the part of the Digital Services Act framework, has been working quite well. I think that what we see is the effect of Digital Services Act as a deterrence rather than something which already was fully enforced through some possible sanctions. So this is what we saw. The AI Act will come into force only next year, and and the European Media Freedom Act as well. But already we worked with the spirit of these pieces of legislation before the elections. And we knew that AI can be exploited to manipulate the elections, so it was a new parameter, a new phenomenon, which we expected to pay influence on the elections. That's why I was really glad that I saw the initiative of the technological companies of Microsoft, Google, and several others who signed the so-called Munich Accord, and they promised to proactively be detecting the especially deep fakes before elections and either remove them or label them. And labeling is the minimum requirement which we had, which we saw in this commitment, and which we also see in the AI Act, which, as I said, will come into force later. So labeling and transparency is the basic request we have through our rules. Also, political parties are committed or promised not to use not only deepfakes but also disinformation. Well, I will stay with AI, not with disinformation. I would get upset because I think that it's shameful that we live in the era that through lying and shouting or dancing on TikTok you can get high political positions. I cannot help it. Sorry, President. But on AI, we saw cases of unlabeled deepfakes. I think it was 130 or 150 cases. So the cases are known, and I will stop here. I want to stress at this moment the major role of EDMO and CEDMO in being active during the elections and showing solid data on disinformation trends and narratives. I traveled to more than half of the member states before elections, and I have to say that the meetings with the colleagues, they are not my colleagues, they are independent, yeah? But with the experts from CEDMO and EDMO were the most valuable ones, because they had very concrete data showing the trend and showing the new narratives coming in the way of the voters. And honestly, this is what I value most, to have solid data. As a politician, I want to have a solid database and understand the trend and facts which help me to take efficient political decisions. And so thank you very much for that, because really the discussions with your colleagues in more than half of the member states were very useful. So what we found out, disinformation, of course, it was used as a method to manipulate the narratives. Some were pan-European. Typically, the elections will be somehow, how to say, rigged or falsely read or these kind of things. There were country-specific narratives and Central European-specific narratives, and here we mainly speak about Ukraine and migration. And Russia is very good in displaying the ability of really precise targeting. They know very well which is the Brits call it soft underbelly, no? Or Achilles heel. It's better, no? And so we saw again the display of very, very precise targeting, and we have to work with it. Also, domestic proxies were very active. Between May and June, the last 2 weeks were the time of the biggest activity and the peak, and especially the false narratives about EU increased very considerably. Winning topics are those which drive people to fear and anxiety. So who am I to tell you? You work with it more than me. On AI, I already spoke about it, but what we did not see was the frequent appearance of deep fakes before elections, but rather cheap fakes and shallow fakes. In other words, still the producers were not so good in producing trustworthy deep fakes, which, without labeling, which will not be recognizable as false. But AI is learning. So this is just a temporary weakness of the technology. Then cybersecurity, we have seen how Russian affiliated networks orchestrated so-called distributed denial of service attacks to draw attention to their operations rather than to truly sabotage the infrastructure. What is also very frequent is overloading the system to employ as many as possible people who deal with the cybersecurity work. So the lessons. First, again, I will repeat it, the work of EDMO and CEDMO are a case in point of situational awareness. We need to know what's happening, we need to know the trend. I am still, and it's my pledge for the future, I'm still missing solid methodology how to assess the impact of disinformation and AI on the real results of the elections. I was not able to say in relation to, for instance, Slovak elections, to what extent the Russian very intense massaging of the public space was key factor for the result of the election. So we need to work on that. We need proactive communication, strategic communication. And here comes one, for me, painful point. When I say we, I mean democratic politicians, mainly. What if, in European member states, we will be missing them in the governments? So when still 1 year ago, I would say we need more coordination on the level of the member state, the sphere of the politics, democratic politics, the state experts, independent experts, researchers, CEDMO experts or EDMO experts, journalists. And now I would like to tell you, please keep your independence. There is a line to be drawn. And we cannot automatically count on the results of truly democratic elections in the EU member states, which will deliver through Democrats. Democratic elections can easily deliver autocrats who will not hesitate to use lying as normal tool and capture the scene of independent experts. I want to be well understood here. Let's not count on the automaticism that the democratic elections will always result in having Democrats, liberal Democrats in the governments. So independence is important. I think you heard Ursula von der Leyen in her political speech. She spoke about the need to strengthen the fact-checking in the EU. And I will always be the one who will be sending signals towards the Commission. Who knows whether I will be heard after I leave? But I think that the Commission will have to be aware that the zone of fact-checking needs to be independent. And so the support from the European Union, from the European budget is desired, is needed, but we have to make sure that the support, the money will not be coming with the influence. So that's my message for the future. The second message for the fact-checkers, and here I am on really thin ice, because over years I was pledging for fact-checking which is neutral, which is a clinical, or how to say, precise work with the data, with the facts. And I will repeat it again today, But already in Riga I said, I think that we are in the era when we should not be working just on fact-checking, but there should be some value in it. Valueless fact-checking could also do harm. So I think that you know exactly what to do, and I think that you were very often in the situation of even moral decision-making when doing your job. So good luck with it. Anyway, I think I speak too long, no? But I'm already on page 4. Page 4, it's a good news, because I only have page 5 to thank you. But before thanking you, I want to say that I was impatiently waiting for what Ursula von der Leyen will say about the new trend and new plan for our things. She said what she said, that she would like to promote more fact-checking and reaction of the society on disinformation campaigns. And she knew exactly why she said it, because through her campaign, she experienced a hell of a lot of it. Yeah? She was facing horrible disinformation campaign. But I think that she also reflected well what we were proposing with Daniel Brown, who cannot be here today, that to establish the job of the fighter against disinformation in the Commission or in sub-government is ridiculous. There must be much broader reaction. And biggest part of the reaction must be done outside of the governments. So through your work, through the work of professional journalism, through the educational system, because the countries where we see no success of disinformation are the countries with good education, with the people who are resilient. So this is something we have to also intensively start doing. And I think Ursula already indicated that she understands this as a broad reaction of the society rather than top-down political decisions or enforcement of the laws. I will be impatiently listening or waiting and then listening carefully what the Executive Vice President Hanna Virkkunen will say on the 12th of November, because she will take over partly my agenda, partly the agenda of Margaret Vestager, who did the digital agenda. For me, it's a moment of big satisfaction, because you know that I was responsible for values and rule of law and democracy, and my colleague had the digital space where all the battles started. So thanks to a very good understanding of Margaret that I have to do my job through her battlefield. She enabled me, or she provided me with a big space, and now Hanna Virkkunen will have it both in her hands. So if you have time, nothing better to do on the 12th of November, please listen, because I think that she will indicate also how the cooperation of the Commission with the civil society and researchers will look like. So once again, it has been a pleasure to be in constant contact with this vibrant community and to see your work evolve into a really key ingredient of the fight against disinformation and fight for more stable democracy in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the introduction of Lesson Learned after EU elections. It's a big warning for us in the Czech Republic because parliamentary elections are close. So next, because we are a little bit late, don't worry, it's not your, don't worry. The Czech hub is one of the 14 hubs that operate across Europe. All hubs are supported and promoted by a central hub, EDMO. Let me therefore welcome to the stage the Program Director of the European Digital Media Observatory, Paolo Cesarini.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank very much Václav for the invitation. And I might say I'm a little bit nervous to talk after Věra, Jourová, but I'll try to do my best. And I would like to start with a short compliment for the choice of the program for this year international conference that CEDMO has organized. The reference to the book of 541 Fahrenheit Bradbury, in fact, has led to a movie in '66 by François Truffaut. And the funny thing is that the same year, Jean-Luc Godard made another dystopic movie, which was Alphaville. And it's nice to confront the two movies, because one was about burning books, suppressing voices, destroying sources of information and science. The other one was replacing human minds with Alpha 60, this futuristic computer that would infiltrate people's mind and replace people's mind. And I think the program today really captured very well the two sides of the threats. One, the technological threats, and the other one, it is more the malicious actor that operates notably in the darkness, in the opaqueness of the digital information space, to actually mislead us by suppressing freedom of expression, by suppressing the ability of citizens to receive and to understand what is reliable information in our environment. The last year, I remember I plead very much for having EDMO as a real joined-up network. And I must say, it's just 1 year ago, precisely, I checked the date, it was on the 5th of November. And I'm really happy to see that 1 year after, a lot of progress has been made across the network. We have, as EDMO EU, we made really a lot of efforts in order to bring all the communities across the 4 pillars that we cover: fact-checking, media literacy, research, policy, together. Let me just remind you of a few achievements. In the area of fact-checking, which is very, very important, we have been collecting and disseminating increasingly the best of the production that is made across the hubs. And this regular publication of the best of fact-checking maps really helps to have a vision of what is going on in terms of narratives. And connected with that, our work in identifying trends and narratives, also for policy support, has been resulting in the regular publication of monthly briefs with the constant monitoring of how narratives pops up, remain in the space and the landscape, and modify according to emerging crises. The emerging crisis can be elections, but can also be wars, but can also be floods, or migrant crisis. And it's interesting to see how narratives moves according to the circumstances, and monitoring them give us an idea where the next attack could be, therefore to be more predictive, more anticipatory and less reactive. That is at least the hope. And I think we put our ability to coordinate at the test during the European elections. And that is really only thanks to the joint effort of all hubs. If we could manage to publish every day a bulletin with information regarding what disinformers were talking about in different countries, in different linguistic areas, the output, I think, has been very impressive and can only be explained by the fact that we share a joint vision and a common vision and common values and objectives. Now I could easily say we have also finally been able to work around common objectives as an EDMO network. In the media literature, and I might say it doesn't stop there because the election is still very much high in our radar screens. The work around Moldavia elections, around Georgia election, what we are doing now in order to intercept what the US election is bringing to Europe in terms of disinformation narratives. It is still going on, and is going on thanks to the collaboration of everybody across all hubs. Second, media literacy. Media literacy has started really to work from a stage where I found it was simply mapping the organization, see what it is, what hands we had on for the work. I think now we started really to share much more information. We publish monthly a digest that highlight the best practice. We have launched for the first time a pan-European campaign where all the hubs were collaborating during the elections, Vote Smart campaign. That is a proof that we can do things together in short time and with a very clear focus. And the last example is the launch of the guidelines of best practices, basically standards for media literacy organizations, which hopefully will be able to raise the general level of capacities across all Europe, which is very important also for those who are looking for funding, as a certification plays very much the role of trust for possible funders on organization that follows the guidelines. They were launched during the UNESCO Media Literacy Week 10 days ago, and the uptake has been very impressive. We have already roughly 70 organizations that have adhered after 10 days to these guidelines, which is a good sign. Research. Well, research, we are building up an enabler. It is a little bit of a pain point because access to data remains an issue, but we are building an enabler, which is an intermediary body. EDMO is very much involved in piloting experience in this field in order to finally better understand the dynamics and the physiology of this information in the future. We are also in this key of working together, acting as a joined-up network, also launched an initiative, a joint research project on transparency of political advertising, which will require probably access to data, so there will be a test case for us. And I'm very happy to see the addition already of 7, 8 hubs, including CEDMO, I think, to this joint research, joint research projects. That's good news. And finally, policy. Policy, we have trying to do our best to monitor the platform reports to assess compliance as compared to the commitments taken under the Code of Practice. Now the situation is changing because the Code of Practice will be converted in all likelihood from the first, in January, let's say, as a Code of Conduct. The DSA kicks in. We need to think about what our role should be in this space. I'm happy to see that there is another joint project that we are carrying out together to monitor the code for the past year, and I see the addition of all the hubs to this initiative, which is very important, I think, to demonstrate our ability to be an advisory organization, network of organizations that can play a role in a future where auditing the DSA is going to be a challenge. So far, good news. Of course, the good news stopped there because, let's face it, this information foreign interference remain a high-level threat. The World Economic Forum has confirmed, and we need to think about the factors that actually influence these dynamics. Geopolitical instability, emergence of and diffusion of AI as a booster of disinformation. And last but not least, a general deterioration of our public sphere. Honestly, I think it's very real what you said, Vera, when politicians not always play the role that they should play. And that it is possible because the media sector in general, in many member states, it is getting weaker and weaker due to lack of resources, due to change on the news cycle, due to the change in the communication channels that put the traditional media in a very awkward situation. So we need to tackle these factors. And I would like to conclude by saying a few words about what I see for the future for us as an EDMO network. I think EDMO has a role to play. I think has demonstrated its utility, its usefulness during the last couple of years, but has to evolve. Has to evolve, in my view, in several ways. One very important, I will only mention three, but there are others, but three important close to my heart are. First of all, we have pillars, no? We have fact-checking, we have media literacy, we have research. I think these pillars do not communicate enough between themselves. We need to integrate fact-checking into research, and research has to become more an applied type of research. We need to develop capacity to investigate themes and situations as they unfold and as they arise, to have a much clearer vision of what the actors, the behaviors, the conduits, the distribution channels of this information are when they start to activate an attack. So we need to work much more on the structures, on the infrastructures of information manipulation, building on the work of fact-checkers. So integrate that, because that will give us much better insights when it comes to translate that into educational activities, into media literacy activities. Pre-banking is the slogan for the moment. Pre-banking, if it doesn't become specific, either is based on issues or is based on technique, but whether it is pre-banking about techniques or issues, has to be specific. And then can become specific only if we develop this deeper knowledge on the actors and what I call the physiology of this information. That is the first point. The second point, I think we should evolve from a monitoring network of organizations when it comes to the code of conduct, when it comes to the DSA implementation, more to an advisory network of organizations. Advisory means that we need to be able to play our independent role vis-à-vis national authorities as well. National authorities will have a very daring and very difficult task tomorrow when the DSA will kick in terms of enforcement, because under Article 35, paragraph 4, I think, they need to produce every year a report that assess the risk assessment of the platforms and the evaluation made by the auditors. On which basis the national authorities, the board of digital service coordinators can do that if they do not call for expert advice from field experts? I can see that it's possible to have a standard auditing of the code, but to understand the effectiveness of the measures, whether the risk has really been mitigated or not, I think the only professionals that can do that are here in this room. And that is, I think, something that we need to work more in terms of establishing working relationship, service relationship, but strictly adhering to our independence with national authorities, with the board. And third, and I finish, I promise, the good news is not the page number 5 and page number 3, last line, is about the structural indicators. I think you said it, Vice President, that in fact, that we still we do not know enough. What has been the impact of disinformation during an electoral campaign in that country? We don't know enough. So EDMO has contributed with developing a number of structural indicators. This is nice work, but it's work on paper for the moment. We need to implement that. And we need to implement it at the granular level, at national level. We need to become a real observatory. It is our name, it is our DNA, to be an observatory. And we need to have a set of criteria that enable us to see over time what is the prominence, what are the sources, what are the audiences, what are the interconnections between actors when it comes to analyzing the overall impact of disinformation campaigns. I will stop there. I will thank you. I have to thank you again for this invitation. I'm very happy to be here this year again, and I hope I'm looking forward for the very fruitful collaboration that we have had as EDMO, you and CEDMO so far, and I'm looking forward for the future. Thank you.
The next talk will be from Silvio Waisboard, professor at George Washington University. He's an expert on journalism and politics, communication studies, and media policy and communication for social change. Unfortunately, Mr. Waisboard could not attend this conference, but he made a video for us.
Hi, I'm Silvio Waisboard. I'm a professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University in Washington, in the United States. I'm sorry I cannot attend the conference at CEDMO. Unfortunately, I have other commitments, but I wish you all the best. And I thank you, everyone at CEDMO, particularly Václav and Anya, for the kind invitation and for this opportunity. So today what I would like to talk about for a few minutes is about the question of post-truth. I wrote an article a few years ago with the title of Truth is What Happens to News. And what I was trying to do with that article is basically try to represent the situation of post-truth, particularly around news and information. The way that I define post-truth is that it's about a split in society in terms of what counts, what defines, legitimate ways of defining what is reality and what is truth. Post-truth is not new. One could argue that there has always been in societies around the world a split, a divide about legitimate ways of producing knowledge and determining what is reality and what is not. What happened in the digital era, I think that this rift, this split, is deeper. And we are more aware of the fact that not everybody in society has similar ways, sort of a shared consensus around what are legitimate forms of knowledge and truth-telling. So what happens in the situation of post-truth is that the evidence of the facts, or what some people consider to be evidence and facts, are not necessarily seen that way by other people in society. Facts and evidence cannot replace what people believe based on narratives, on storytelling, on emotions, on their own personal beliefs about what counts as truth and what counts as a lie. So here we are in a situation in which some parts of society might believe that the truth is self-evident because of facts, because of evidence, but other people might believe that for other reasons, those facts and that evidence doesn't count for much. It does not attest to the existence, to the presence, to the verification of reality. So we are in that situation right now, I will say much around the world, in a situation in which our possibilities of express ourselves on the internet through multiple ways gives room to express different ways in which we think about what reality is and how we define reality. We can see examples of post-truth in the way that people believe, for example, about climate change. The people believe the legitimacy of electoral results. People's beliefs about health, for example, the rise and the consolidation of the anti-vaccine movement around the world. There are a number of examples in particularly what I would say hot-button issues. Issues that become sort of identity anchors that define the way that people feel very strongly about certain issues, about politics, the environment, about science, in which this split that I was mentioning becomes much more manifest. And what we know from a number of studies is that it's not sufficient to provide evidence about, let's say, climate change, or evidence about vaccine safety, or evidence about the legitimacy of election results to convince most people or everybody about the fact that, let's say, according to science, according to experts, the truth seems pretty self-evident. And I think that what is happening here is that when certain beliefs, certain convictions become sort of anchor in certain forms of political, cultural, and social identity, it's much more difficult to talk people out of their convictions, even though they are presented with what some people call evident facts about what reality looks like. So the situation here is much more complicated, and this matters for a number of reasons. One matters because of democracy, of course, right? Democracy requires a minimal consensus, shared beliefs about the legitimacy of the electoral process. Without that, it's very difficult that large numbers of people in a society will agree about the legitimacy of a given government. And this also matters, given that many of the challenges in today's world, we need to have some basic consensus about science. This is not just about environmental and health issues, but about food, about water, in which science tells us what the situation is, what are the challenges, and what are their possible solutions to tackle these global problems. But if science is not seen as a legitimate form of knowledge by a number of people in society, then we're confronting a big problem. And to this problem, I think that we don't have any easy solutions. What we know for sure is that it's very difficult to have a common shared basis of knowledge about these issues, as long as post-truth exists. So post-truth means that large segments of society distrust institutions whose business is basically to produce legitimate knowledge that helps citizens, governments deal with public affairs. This is the crisis of legitimacy, for example, of journalism. This is the crisis of legitimacy of science and especially some government agencies that produce data that public life needs. So we know that in a number of democracies, particularly, the low trust of these associations is not just a problem of legitimacy or prestige or beliefs. It's particularly a problem about the fact that these institutions provide the kind of basic knowledge that we need in order to deal with a number of issues. I will say equally troubling, equally worrisome, is the fact when these beliefs about reality that are not grounded on reality become sort of aligned with certain political movements. This, for example, is the case of populism, whether or not we're talking about right-wing or left-wing populism, because populism believes that reality is divided in two halves, us versus them, with different conceptions of truth, different conceptions of what counts as legitimate knowledge, different conceptions about, let's say, for example, journalism, what is good and bad journalism. Then populism in some ways deepens the situation of post-truth and takes advantage of the situation of, let's say, a split in society about what is a legitimate institution and what is legitimate knowledge. Another political manifestation of post-truth are actual social movements in society that don't believe in the science, that don't believe that climate change is real, that don't believe that vaccines do good for human health. Therefore, what we have is not just an opinion, just what people believe correctly or incorrectly, but actually we have mobilized movements. People organize around ideas that not necessarily are grounded in what the science and other knowledge institutions produce in terms of what counts as reality. And here we're dealing with sort of a very difficult problem, again, which is not just about a matter of public opinion, but it's organized public opinions on movements and public opinions that actually grounds the way that people believe in the world and provides narratives for them to understand who they are in terms of political and social identities. And that is a particularly challenging problem. Post-truth, of course, is connected to another sort of big problem that we have been confronting in the world, particularly in the last decades, which is the question of disinformation. Disinformation is information that is deliberately spread in order to confuse people, in order to convince people about issues that are not real, beliefs that do not exist, right? So disinformation travels well. Disinformation is effective in a situation of post-truth, in this situation of sort of a splinter public opinion about reality. That is the appeal of disinformation. Disinformation works because there is a social reservoir of distrust in institutions and the inclination to believe on things that are not necessarily true, like conspiracy theories, for example. So the question is not how this information spread, how does it sort of exist in society, but why it seems to be so appealing to large numbers of people around the world, which is not just a question of the distrust, it's a question of a conviction about what counts as truth or not. So this information works because the ground is already prepared to disbelieve, to not to believe in what, let's say, certain governments or political parties or scientists or journalists say, but also is inclined to believe on certain things that, if we take a different perspective, are not grounded in reality. So we cannot understand the strength of this information, the appeal of this information, without understanding this condition of post-truth. I often get asked this question, is there any solution to post-truth? Can this divide be bridged? Can people agree on this? And that, to me, is sort of one of the hardest questions to answer. Why? Because we don't have, it seems to me, strong evidence that at scale in society at large, we can envision ways in which this divide can be bridged. It doesn't mean that nothing works. It means that we are facing a very sort of difficult challenge in trying to come up with sort of a consensus around shared sort of forms of knowledge. You know, the idea of a shared epistemology, a way of producing legitimate knowledge about the world. I don't think we ever existed, we ever had a situation like that, a situation in which there is sort of large consensus around this. I think that the digital society has made it much more pronounced, much more visible, the fact that these divides do exist. This should not sort of make people say, well, nothing works. The question is trying to figure out within this split that exists in society, probably in some societies it's deeper, more pronounced than in other societies, what are some of the tactics that could work in order to bridge this? That's what I think that, for example, when we think about strategies to counter disinformation, such as fact-checking on media literacy, the question there is whether or not these and other tactics are sufficient to bridge this epistemological gap that post-truth reveals. And I think the evidence is mixed at best in order to determine whether or not people who fundamentally disagree on what is a legitimate form of knowledge can come closer to an agreement on what are facts, what is evidence, or what are legitimate ways of producing information. To me, it seems to me that for all of us who are in this conference, who are interested in information, in journalism, and in communication, need to think about effective ways of how this bridge, the post-truth bridge, can be addressed in ways to find some common ground to determine what counts as reality. those are my thoughts on this topic. Again, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm sorry I cannot be there. I wish you all the best, and enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Silvio Waisboard, professor at the George Washington University. Now another speaker, Michal Kormaňák, is coming with concrete data and trends. He is the head of the public affairs team at IPSOS, specializing in election research. At IPSOS, he is also in charge of projects for the state administration, non-profit organization, and the academic sector.
Good morning to everyone, and thank you for inviting me. I will use some charts, so let's see if it's working. Yes. When I was thinking about what I'm going to talk about today, I also used some reference for a book. This book is from the British historian Ian Kershaw, and the name of this book is To the Hell and Back. It's not so much optimistic. Obviously, it's about the interwar period, and one of the chapters is Dancing on a Volcano, and he was describing this period that societies in Europe were dancing on a volcano. And I would like to focus on this information in the age of the populism. Are we living in something what we call in IPSOS a new world disorder? Maybe yes, because for several years now, we are facing, and societies all around the world are facing interconnected huge crises such as COVID, Russian aggression on Ukraine, ongoing climate crisis, energy crisis, inflation, etc. And we can say that the world is in tension. It was already said it before that 2024 is a crucial year, because it's the largest political experiment in human history, and almost 4 billion people are going to the polls in 70 countries. And obviously, we are still expecting the result of the US elections. And what are the conditions for the populism? On the one side, you have the public opinion, you have something that people are feeling that they need some leader. You have the sense of insecurity, and of course, those are the voice for the leadership, and those are the conditions for the populism. This is something what is very actual. We can think about if U.S. elections are the real test of the democracy. We can see the data from our colleagues from IPSOS US. And you can see the second column, 64% of Republicans voters are concerned that election is rigged. Why do they think it? Is it objective that in the US the procedure of elections are so bad that they should be concerned? Or this is the impact of disinformation campaign, maybe from some elites? Maybe even from the president of the USA, and we will see what's going to happen after a few days. But this is something what is serious threat that people believe in countries that elections could be rigged. We see that the populism in the world is spreading. We have the study with the 28 countries. And 2/3 of the people all around the world are thinking that the main divide in our society is between ordinary citizens and the political and economical elites. Also, they think, in general, and I have some the countries of the Central Europe for comparison, that the countries need a strong leader to take country back from the rich and powerful. Those are the conditions for the populism. And also they think, the Poland is exception. People in Poland don't think so much that country is in decline, but in globally you can see, and obviously it's the biggest number is in Slovakia, that country is in decline. What is the important for the populism? And then I'm going back to the disinformations. The satisfaction with the state of democracy. 1/3 of the people in Czechia is satisfied with the state of democracy, but only 20% of the people in Slovakia and Hungary are satisfied. And this is, again, those conditions are not good for the environment we are living in. And the last data for the populism is description of countries. Again, there are three countries: Czechia, Slovakia, and Hungary. And you can see that most of the people think that most politicians are corrupt. No matter who wins the elections, the situation will not change much. It's about the half of the population. And what is from the second part of the chart, the minority of the people think or believe that the justice system treats everyone fairly. Okay, so I talked already about the populism, and the populism is good for disinformation environment. This is our global CEO, our chief executive of IPSOS, Ben Page. Last year he invited Prague, and he had interview for Forbes, for Czech Forbes. And he said, what you can read here, that in times of stress and uncertainty, conspiracies are more common. I won't read the whole text, but we are thinking in IPSOS why people believe those disinformation and conspiracies. And this is because it's actually a desire to believe that someone must have a plan. And Ben was continuing, but if you ever work for governments, and I've spent much of my career working with them, you learn the terrible truth that in reality, often no one has a clue what's going on. And this is something what is not believable for the part of the people who are believing for this information. Then we have a little bit different countries, but still Czechia, Slovakia, and Poland. And the majority of the people thinks that disinformation is a major or medium problem. But obviously, what is disinformation for them? It's a very individual question. I can show you some 5 disinformation narratives we tested in Czechia, Slovakia, and Poland. You can see them on the top of the slides. First of them was about the cause of the storms and devastating floods in the Central Europe in mid-September. And the disinformation was that the chemicals was sprayed by planes flying over the Mediterranean Sea, etc. And on the first part of the screen, you can see that in Czechia, 15% of the people was familiar with this disinformation, more in the Slovakia and in the Poland, and only 13% of the Czech population believed this disinformation, but in Slovakia and Poland it was more. It was 22 and 25% of the people who believed it is believable, rather or completely. Second disinformation is that 159 countries have joined the SPFS Russia equivalent of SWIFT. And again, you can see that in Czechia, not so much people is familiar with this disinformation. In Poland, it was the most people who were familiar with this. But you can see that it's much more believable than the narrative before. Even in Czechia and Poland, almost half of the population say, okay, it's maybe something I could believe. As many as 5 of the 8 members of the Politburo of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union who decided to send Warsaw Pact troops on the territory in 1968 were Ukrainians. This is something what is mostly used in Czech environment. You can see that in Czechia the people are familiar with this more than in Slovakia or Poland. And, this is the number that 67% of the Slovakian population believe this is true. And the European Commission, which is very interesting because we have the Vice President, Mr. Jourová here, and the European Commission is introducing European Digital Wallet from 2026, which will also record the holder's carbon footprint. And again, in Czechia, it's not so much familiar, this kind of disinformation, mostly in Poland, and the Polish population, half of them believe that's true. And the last one is about the vaccines. It was already the professor Waisboard told about the anti-vaccine movements, which are very strong, and you can see that a lot of people in all countries is familiar with the anti-vaccine disinformative narratives, and you can see that more than 1/3 of the population in all countries are believing this is true. So that's it from my side, and I just wanted to say that we should be very careful in the times of the populist, when the populist movements are spreading, and we should be much more focusing on disinformation and fighting with disinformation. Thank you.
Michal Kormaňák, head of the public affairs team at IPSOS. Thank you for presenting interesting data from our region. As I mentioned earlier, today you will also see the result of research on which hubs collaborated. One of them is presented by Péter Kreko, the consortium leader for the Hungarian Digital Media Observatory.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitations, and also congratulations for CEDMO for the renewal of the hub. And so the research I'm going to briefly discuss, and just to give an appetizer on, is the fruit of a cooperation, and the idea of this cooperation born exactly 1 year ago here at this conference, and I'm enjoying right now the third time of being here at the CEDMO annual conference. And on last year's conference, there was a discussion we had with someone who is responsible for the field at the European Commission, and she said that Hungarian data alone, and I'm from Hungary, simply does not matter, does not have an impact for important people in the European Commission. They do not really listen, they do not care, for a simple reason that Hungary is an outlier. So if we want to do anything, if we want to do some good solid research, let's focus on the region. And I'm really glad that we could cooperate with Nick Hinek and Michal in putting together Hungarian, Slovakian, Czech, and also with the help of the colleagues from abroad, the Bulgarian-Romanian Digital Media Observatory, Bulgarian dataset as well. So I'm just going to introduce the results of this poll. I don't go into methodological details about the nature of the samples themselves, but they were representative samples from all the 4 countries that we are talking about. And also it was conducted right before the European parliamentary election. And our main question was that how receptive Central Eastern European population is to certain kinds of disinformation narratives, and mainly focused on the ones that are rather widespread in the European Union. EDMO prepares regularly this list of disinformation narratives that are rather pan-European, and we can say that most of the disinformation narratives we have sometimes with a bit of national taste, but are increasingly pan-European. So we focused on these narratives that appear in Western Europe as well, but at the same time we also wanted to focus on some other topics. I have a lot of data, I have a lot of graphs, and I can just assure you that I won't tell them all. So I'm just giving some highlights of the data. So first, what we were curious about is conspiracy mentality and disinformation beliefs in Central Eastern Europe. What we can see, and I'm sad to say that as a Hungarian citizen myself, but Hungary is the champion in terms of beliefs in conspiracy theories, disinformation, and the data that we found in Hungary is usually more similar to what we could see in Bulgaria, while in Czech Republic and Slovakia, these beliefs are typically on a bit lower level and quite similar to each other. So what we found, for example, is that 72% of Hungarians believe that there are secret organizations that greatly influence political decisions. In Czech Republic, it's 46%, so it's still high, but not as high. In Bulgaria, 67%, Slovakia, 43%. There is quite widespread belief in all over the region that the native population in Europe is being replaced by immigrant population following a grand strategy. So it's the great replacement theory that has been quite marginal beforehand, but right now it's pretty much mainstream. Majority of the population in Hungary and in Bulgaria believes this. About 1/3 of the population in Czech Republic and Slovakia shares this view. Also, if you ask, for example, that some pieces of Russian disinformation, Ukraine has previously committed genocide against the Russian minority living in its territory, 62% of Hungarians agreed with this statement. In Bulgaria, it was 44%. Czech Republic and Slovakia, less than 1/3 of the population. And I would just point to this very graph, because this is something that underlines the power of disinformation. So Hungary, with a history of the Soviet Union and with Russia that definitely does not make the two countries friends, have become so receptive to Russian disinformation narratives, despite the fact that there are no cultural similarity, there are no language connections, there are no religious connections. It's just Russia-friendly policies combined with a very highly centralized media landscape that is spreading disinformation that does this work. So, what we also found is that most of the disinformation statements are going hand in hand. So if you believe in one of them, then you tend to believe in others as well. So it's like a chain. You pull it and the whole comes through. So everyone have quoted titles of books so far in their presentation, so I don't want to be so intellectually thin that I do not quote one. So I would quote Peter Pomerantsev's "Nothing is true, but everything is possible." And I really like the idea that he highlighted, and we also wanted in this comparative poll to focus on this very essence of the information environment that we live in, that finally we lose our optimism about that we can differentiate between what is facts and what's not, what is truth and what's not, or does facts exist at all. And what we have found is skepticism towards facts and objective reality is alarmingly widespread in all 4 countries. In Hungary, for example, 56% of the population said that objective reality does not really exist. There are just different opinions. So this is some kind of hardcore postmodernism. But in practice, what does it mean? And also, if we take a look at other data, many things quoted as fact in the press are usually just opinion. In Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Hungary, and Slovakia as well, more than 1/3 of the population more than half of the population, with the exception of Slovakia, believe this statement, or we cannot be sure what is communicated as facts as true. More than 2/3 of the population in all the 4 countries believed in this statement. And I think this is the real danger that we are facing at the moment. And that's, I think, a huge challenge to fact checkers as well, because this kind of endemic mistrust has an impact on everyone. And despite the assumption that you cannot be persuaded by a non-popular, by a non-trusted source, you can. Usually what we have found is that this kind of truth relativist statements are very highly correlating with statements on conspiracy theories and specific narratives of disinformation. So if you believe in nothing, then you finally believe everything, every bizarre statement, just because it is presented as an alternative to the official narratives. And of course, in Hungary, we have found higher figures, but elsewhere, these figures are also pretty high. Sorry. Yeah, we also wanted to check some other kind of data that are not directly related to disinformation. And what we were curious about, for example, that how much the voters in Central Eastern Europe afraid of election interference from third countries. And Vice President Jourová have already mentioned this topic. And what we have found is that in all the 4 countries, there are rather high levels of awareness or fears about some kind of election interference before the European Parliament elections. There are widespread expectations towards election interference, especially in Hungary and Bulgaria. More than half of Bulgarians and more than half of Hungarians thought that the United States is going to interfere into their political processes. But also there were widespread fears about Russia. In Czech Republic, Russia were obviously the main danger of interference in EU elections. Bulgarians are most worried about the interference of the United States. Slovakians or Hungarians are afraid of both Russia and the United States going to interfere, and China is seen as the most distant threat. But I think we might say on the one hand that in a time when election interference exists, this is something that gives some room for optimism. But I would rather say that it just fits into this endemic mistrust, and it's a geopolitical mistrust as well, and it targets the European Union as well, in Czech Republic, in Hungary and Slovakia and Bulgaria as well. So it adds to this endemic mistrust that everyone wants to do some tricks on us. And finally, it can also undermine the belief in the integrity of the electoral processes. And yeah, I would just point on one graph at the bottom of this slide, which is about the migration flows for the European Union. What we have found is that in Czech Republic, in Hungary and Slovakia as well, not all the questions were raised in Bulgaria. Majority of the population, so 70% of the population believes that migration flows to the European Union is the biggest problem. And this is a question that does not really divide voters across party lines for a very simple reason, because everyone is afraid of migrants. And as a last slide, yeah, we also did some research on polarization as a driver of disinformation and this many-hand worldview. What we found is that many-hand worldview is widespread in all over Central Eastern Europe. This statement that politics is ultimately a struggle between good and evil are shared than about a third of the population in Czech Republic, Slovakia and Hungary. And of course, if you think that the other side is evil, then you can you can be pretty receptive to all the hyperbolic statements and disinformation that targets them. And yeah, as a very last slide, some good news, especially for the Czech Republic. We also raised a question that is not related to disinformation, that is not related to geopolitics, but it's related to neighbor relations. And who thinks that what are the opinion of Czechs, Slovaks, and Hungarians on each other? And as the data shows, majority of both Hungarians and Slovaks see Czechia as the champion of the region. So where general social, political, and economic situation is better than their respective countries. And Slovakia is not seen with that high envy by Czech and Hungarian voters. And it seems that Hungarians are the ones that are the most, where the belief is the most widespread, that in Czech Republic and Slovakia the life is just better, and in Hungary we do not see this high envy. So Czech Republic seems to be, I mean, in these three countries, the country that everyone or most of the citizens want to live in. And as a very final closing remark, jumping back on the topic of disinformation, Paolo have already mentioned that politicians are important sources of disinformation and conspiracy theories, and we live in an era where we just cannot think that disinformation comes from the margins and comes from outside, but it usually comes from elected politicians. And what we found, especially regarding the geopolitical narrative, so pro-Russian disinformation, sympathies towards Russia and antipathy towards the United States, that it really follows a political pattern. It follows party preferences. In Hungary, the voters of Fidesz, the governmental party, were much more pro-Russian, much more afraid and paranoid towards the United States. In Slovakia, it was the voters of Smer and Robert Fico, and in the Czech Republic, these were the voters of ANO that had usually less suspicion towards Russia, a bit better opinion, and at the same time, quite negative opinions on the European Union and also on the United States. So thanks a lot for your attention, and this was just an appetizer. Stay tuned. We will publish our report soon, and thanks a lot again for the invitation, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much. This part of the conference, 451 Degrees of Disinformation, will be concluded by the Rector of Charles University, Milena Králíčková.
Dear Mrs. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends, it's my great pleasure and real honor to host at Charles University in Patriotic Hall again a conference of Central European Digital Media Observatory. I was able to see just last two presentations, but in fact already from the data I have seen and from both of the presentations, which I would like to think for, we see that disinformation and fight for democracy is a real problem for Czech Republic, for Central Europe, and I'm really proud and honored that the project of Central European Digital Media Observatory is home at Charles University. For the management of the university, it is a pleasure to see that there is a Faculty of Social Sciences cooperating with one of our medical faculties and Faculty of Mathematics and Physics and many others. It's not just a matter for one specialization. It's a cooperation between plenty of specialties, cooperation between academics, students, non-academic staff, and all of them are united in the great effort to really bring evidence, science behind the real problem that we have now in Europe. So I would like to thank Mr. Václav Moravec for really being the soul and heart of CEDMO, all his team for arranging this great opportunity and a great event for us. And I just would like to invite you for future again to Charles University, because I believe that CEDMO will stay home at Charles University, will work on the current problem of our society, unfortunately current problem of not only of Czech Republic and Central Europe, but the whole Europe. And I'm pretty sure that we, as management of Charles University, will support it in future very much. So thank you very much for being here. Enjoy the rest of the event and come back to Charles University soon again. Thank you.